panic at the airport. A plane on fire and a city enveloped in flames. The dramatic photos and videos that followed sparked fear and even panic.
He was one of Mexico's most notorious cartel leaders, wanted in the U.S. with a $15 million reward. Now, sources tell ABC News that the man known as El Mencho is
Breaking tonight, he was Mexico's most wanted criminal for years. Say they've drug kingpin known as El Mencho, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel.
The satellite had been watching the same cluster of mountain cabins for 12 consecutive days. No confirmed movement, no confirmed identity. Just a cell phone signal that had no business being where it was, pinging a tower deep in the pine forests above Tapalpa, Jalisco, and the quiet, building certainty inside a federal intelligence cell that they had finally located the ghost they had been chasing for over 2 decades. The analysts didn't celebrate. Not yet. They had been close before. This time, they waited for the confirmation that couldn't be argued with. For 11 years, he was invisible. The most wanted man in Mexico and the United States simultaneously. A $15 million bounty issued by the U.S. government. Thousands of pages of federal indictments sealed in courtrooms from Chicago to San Diego. Hundreds of coordinated intelligence assets burning through operational budgets across 2 hemispheres. And nothing. Until one phone, one signal, one moment of carelessness from someone who loved him. His name was Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes. The world knew him as El Mencho, the architect, supreme commander, and founding violence of the CJNG, the Cártel Jalisco Nueva Generación. Born in July 1966 in the small agricultural municipality of Aguililla, Michoacán, into a family that worked the land and earned almost nothing from it, he picked avocados as a boy on hillside orchards that smelled of soil and sun. He later wore a police uniform in Michoacán, a detail that law enforcement analysts never stopped finding darkly instructive. A man who understood how institutions worked, who had seen firsthand how investigations were built, who knew what surveillance looked like from the inside. And then he crossed to the other side of it entirely. His criminal history in the United States predated his rise to cartel leadership by years. He was arrested on American soil for heroin trafficking, served time in federal custody, and was deported back to Mexico. Not once, multiple times. Each return deepened his connections, expanded his network, and accelerated a transformation that the DEA watched with mounting alarm. By 2009, he had co-founded the CJNG from the wreckage of a predecessor organization, and within 5 years, the cartel had expanded into one of the most powerful and feared criminal enterprises on the planet. His genius, if that word can exist in this context, was structural. He didn't simply build a cartel, he engineered a franchise. Regional commanders operated with their own authority. Supply chains continued under disruption. The organization was designed, from its foundation, to absorb the arrest, capture, or death of any single person, including its creator. Especially its creator. The break came not from an informant, not from a financial trail. It came through a woman, someone described by intelligence sources as personally close to El Mencho, close enough that her device traveled with him or near him deep into the mountains of southern Jalisco. When her phone pinged a cell tower above the colonial weekend town of Tapalpa, a place known for cobblestone streets, artisan cheese vendors, and the kind of cool mountain air that draws city families on long weekends, analysts at a joint DEA and HSI intelligence fusion cell immediately cross-referenced the signal against 12 days of layered aerial surveillance data. What resolved from that dataset was a property of upscale wooden cabins, their terracotta rooftops barely visible beneath the pine canopy. Stone pathways connected the structures. A diesel generator ran around the clock behind the main building. Armed men moved through the property on rotating 12-hour shifts, and ringing the entire perimeter, embedded in the soil and the brush, landmines. He had 400 armed men protecting those hills. Drone surveillance confirmed the defensive network was not improvised. It was layered, rehearsed, and built to defeat a military-grade assault. Security analysts who later examined the compound described it as one of the most fortified personal protection arrangements ever documented in the history of organized crime in the Americas. He had constructed a fortress inside a mountain tourist destination, surrounded by pine trees and weekend hikers, while the most sophisticated law enforcement apparatus in the Western Hemisphere spent years searching for him on flat ground. On the morning of February 22, 2026, the Mexican army moved before the sun fully cleared the ridgeline. Helicopters, dark, angular shapes against a sky still bruised with early light, dropped low over the forested slopes, cutting through the cold fog that Tapalpa wears like a blanket in the early hours. Ground units advanced from two directions simultaneously. One element up the single narrow access road, another element pushing silently through the tree line on foot, wearing night optics, moving without sound, until the moment they couldn't. The element of surprise lasted approximately 40 seconds. What followed was a sustained, violent firefight. The CJNG security detail was not ceremonial. These were trained men with prepared defensive positions, belt-fed weapons, and a standing order with no ambiguity. Spent shell casings would later lie across the stone walkways in drifts, like a second layer of gravel the compound had always had. The main structure, a two-story cabin with heavy hand-hewn timber beams, a broad stone terrace, and panoramic views of the valley dropping away below, had every window completely destroyed. Shattered glass covered the blood-stained terrace, catching the morning light like something fragile and beautiful that had simply been dropped from a great height. When the shooting stopped, El Mencho was alive, critically wounded but breathing. Military medics stabilized him at the scene. He was loaded onto a helicopter and lifted out of those mountains. Destination Mexico City and emergency surgical care. He never arrived. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, the man two governments on two continents had spent more than 20 years and hundreds of millions of dollars hunting, was pronounced dead in transit. The ghost was finally, permanently gone. But what came next made the raid look like the quiet part of the story. Within hours of the government's announcement, the CJNG's retaliatory infrastructure activated with a speed and coordination that stunned even veteran analysts. In Puerto Vallarta, the Pacific Coast resort city where families were spending their Sunday afternoon on turquoise water, and where American and Canadian tourists packed the waterfront esplanade, vehicles were set ablaze in broad daylight. Columns of black smoke rose above the palm trees lining the bay. Tourists locked themselves inside hotel rooms and sent panicked messages home. Cartel gunmen moved through streets that had been peaceful 30 minutes before. The U.S. State Department issued an emergency shelter-in-place advisory for American citizens in the area. Airlines began canceling flights out of Puerto Vallarta's international airport before the afternoon was over. It was not only Puerto Vallarta. The same coordinated violence erupted across Jalisco, Michoacán, Guanajuato, Colima, and more than a dozen additional states. Before nightfall on February 22nd, cartel retaliation had reached 20 of Mexico's 32 states. Highways were blocked with burning trucks. Roadblocks cut off entire municipalities. Gunfire broke out in residential areas where ordinary people, street vendors packing up their stalls, school teachers driving home, families sitting down to Sunday dinner, had no part in any of this and received no warning before it arrived at their doorstep. They simply woke up inside it. If you've been tracking the CJNG's rise for years and want to understand where this power vacuum leads, drop your analysis in the comments. This conversation matters. The scale of what Mencho constructed and what the CJNG became under his 2-decade command resists easy summary. Under his direction, the organization became the dominant global distributor of fentanyl to the United States, the synthetic opioid responsible for tens of thousands of American deaths annually. They moved methamphetamine and cocaine at volumes that dwarfed prior cartel operations. Money moved through real estate developments in Guadalajara, through restaurant franchise chains spread across central Mexico, through import-export businesses registered to third-party names, and through cryptocurrency wallets traced to 11 separate countries. The FBI assessed CJNG operations as active in nearly every major American city. From the port of Manzanillo, where falsified shipping manifests disguised container loads of narcotics bound for U.S. distribution hubs, to street-level networks in Chicago, Houston, and Los Angeles, the infrastructure was global, disciplined, and nearly invisible to anyone living inside it who wasn't specifically looking. And at the center of all of it, for over a decade, was a man almost impossible to prove existed. No verified public photographs for years at a stretch, no media interviews, no public appearances. He changed locations every 72 hours, communicated exclusively through human intermediaries, and built his command structure so deliberately compartmentalized that some regional commanders reportedly never once met him face to face. The single vulnerability. The one thread that unraveled a 2-decade operational security record was human. It always is in the end. The human cost of his organization runs far beneath the surface of any news broadcast. Entire municipalities across Michoacán and Jalisco had their civil governments functionally replaced. Local officials swapped for cartel-aligned figures. Police commanders bribed into silence or simply disappeared when they declined. Communities that had grown avocados and raised families for generations watched their teenage boys recruited into CJNG armed wings before finishing secondary school handed rifles instead of diplomas. And across the border, in kitchens and bedrooms in Chicago, Houston, Denver, and Los Angeles, families buried children who had taken a single pill pressed to look exactly like a legitimate pharmaceutical, a product that had traveled from a CJNG-controlled laboratory through a transnational distribution chain thousands of miles long before arriving in a coat pocket or a nightstand drawer. Many of those families had never heard the name Mencho. A significant number still haven't. The succession question hit intelligence desks within minutes of the confirmed death. His son, Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, known within the organization as El Menchito, had been arrested in Mexico in 2015, extradited to the United States in 2020, and sentenced to life in federal prison plus 30 years. His daughter was in American custody. His brother Abraham had been arrested in Jalisco in April 2024. His brother Antonio was taken in 2022. The family pipeline had been systematically dismantled years before the Tapalpa raid was ever planned. What remained were the regional commanders, men who had spent years building independent local power bases inside the CJNG franchise model, and who now had every incentive to compete rather than consolidate around a single successor. Analysts at the DEA and HSI issued an immediate assessment. The absence of a clear heir did not signal stability. It signaled competition. And competition inside a cartel of this scale and geographic reach does not stay contained to the people competing. It spreads outward, into communities, into the slow, sustained territorial violence that grinds on for years without ever making the front page of an international newspaper. Mexico's security forces moved fast. In the days immediately following the Tapalpa operation, more than 70 suspects were arrested across the country. 34 cartel operatives were killed in direct confrontations. 23 inmates were broken out of a prison facility during the chaos, a coordinated jailbreak prosecutors described as a direct organizational response ordered before El Mencho's body was even cold. And in the 48 hours following the confirmed death, 25 members of Mexico's National Guard were killed in retaliatory engagements. 25 people who left home that morning for a shift, doing a job that most of the world never thinks about until a breaking news alert forces them to look up from their phones. Think this story belongs in front of more people? Share it and stay with us for the cases that don't make the nightly news. The town of Tapalpa grew quiet again after the soldiers left. Residents swept broken glass from their doorsteps and storefronts. The mountain air returned, cold and clean and smelling of pine, the way it always does in those hills, regardless of what has happened in them. The compound was sealed behind military tape, its terracotta rooftops, blown-out windows, bullet-marked stone terrace, and spent brass still embedded in the pathway gravel, now forming an active forensic scene where Army investigators cataloged weapons caches, encrypted communications hardware, and documents that would spend years moving through legal proceedings on 2 continents. In Aguililla, the Michoacan town where Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was born, where avocado orchards still run along the low hillsides, where his family once had almost nothing, residents reportedly said very little when the news came through. An elderly man who had known the Oseguera family described him only as a person who left a long time ago and never truly came back, not in any form the town could recognize or hold. The orchards bore fruit again that spring. The trees made no record of the occasion. What comes next for the CJNG is the question now consuming intelligence services from Washington to Bogota to Madrid. The organization was engineered specifically to survive this moment. Its franchise architecture, regional cells bound not by personal loyalty to a single leader, but by shared supply chains, brand infrastructure, and mutual financial dependence, means the narcotics continue moving even without the person who designed the system. The DEA and HSI called the Tapalpa operation a historic blow to one of the most dangerous criminal organizations on Earth. A historic blow, not a final one. The fentanyl is still being pressed into pills. The money is still being cleaned through businesses that look completely ordinary from the outside. And somewhere, right now, a name is being passed quietly between 2 phones in a room with no cameras. And that name belongs to whoever the CJNG decides to become next. Remember, this story is a work of fiction, created for educational and entertainment purposes. If you found this compelling, like and subscribe so you never miss a case like this. Thanks for watching.